Robert Mercer stood at the edge of Lake Willow, his family's property for 3 generations, watching as the once crystal waters turned a sickly shade of green. The morning sun, usually dancing across ripples in dazzling patterns, now illuminated an expanding algae bloom that had appeared seemingly overnight. He knelt down, dipping his fingers into the water before quickly withdrawing them with disgust. "Damn it," he muttered, wiping his hand on his jeans. 20 years as an environmental engineer had taught him to recognize chemical contamination when he saw it. This wasn't natural. This was deliberate. Behind him, the sprawling development of Willow Creek Estates had been encroaching on his property line for the past 5 years. What had once been acres of untouched forests surrounding his family's lakefront property had transformed into cookie-cutter homes, with pristine lawns and an overzealous homeowners association that had been trying to force Robert to sell since day one. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The name Ellen Hargrove, HOA president, flashed across the screen. Robert declined the call, the third one this week. He knew exactly what she wanted, the same thing she'd been demanding at every community meeting he'd been invited to as a courtesy. "Mr. Mercer, your undeveloped property is an eyesore that's bringing down property values," she'd said with that saccharine smile that never reached her eyes. "The HOA board has unanimously voted to offer you fair market value. It's a generous offer considering the rustic state of your cabin." What Ellen and her manicured minions failed to understand was that Robert's rustic cabin sat on the oldest and most valuable piece of property in Riverdale County, not just because of the lake, but because of what lay beneath it. "Dad, what's happening to the water?" Robert turned to see his 16-year-old daughter, Lily, walking down the worn path to the dock, her face clouded with concern. She'd grown up swimming in this lake every summer, just as Robert had, just as his father had before him. "Someone's been dumping chemicals," he replied, his voice tight with controlled anger. "And I have a pretty good idea who." Lily's eyes widened. "The HOA? But why would they do that? Isn't that, like, super illegal?" "Very illegal," Robert confirmed, pulling out his phone to take pictures of the contamination. "And they're about to find out who they're messing with." What the Willow Creek Estates HOA didn't know, what Robert had kept close to his chest for years despite their harassment, was that his property didn't just include the picturesque lake. It also contained the natural spring and aquifer that supplied water to the entire town of Riverdale, including their precious development. Robert had signed a generous lease agreement with the town 20 years ago, allowing them to access and distribute the water at rates far below market value. That agreement was coming up for renewal next month, and he'd been planning to simply extend it under the same terms. But now, as he documented the environmental damage, his phone buzzed again with a text message from Ellen. "Meeting with county commissioners about your eyesore property today at 2. Final chance to accept our offer before we take further action. This can be easy or difficult. Your choice." Robert smiled grimly as he forwarded the pictures to his lawyer and his contact at the Environmental Protection Agency. Then he texted back a single sentence. "Looking forward to seeing you at the meeting, Ellen." As he walked back toward the cabin with Lily, planning his next moves, Robert felt a strange mixture of anger and satisfaction. The HOA had finally crossed a line that would allow them to stop playing defense. They thought they were dealing with a stubborn old man clinging to a worthless piece of land. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Inside his cabin, Robert pulled out the folder of documents he compiled over the past year as the HOA's tactics had grown increasingly aggressive. Property deeds, water rights documentation, geological surveys, and most importantly, the town's water contract with his signature at the bottom. It was time to show the HOA exactly who owned the town's water supply and what happens when you poison a lake belonging to an environmental engineer with nothing left to lose. The county commissioner's meeting room buzzed with quiet conversation as Robert and Lily slipped into seats near the back. Robert nodded to a few familiar faces, locals who'd known his family for decades. The front rows were occupied by identical polo shirts embroidered with the Willow Creek Estates logo, a sea of pastel colors, and perfectly coiffed hair. Ellen Hargrove stood at the center of her flock, her platinum blonde bob gleaming under the fluorescent lights as she gestured emphatically to Commissioner Davis, a man whose campaign had been generously funded by real estate developers. Robert watched as she handed him a folder, their expressions serious and conspiratorial. "Are you nervous?" Lily whispered, eyeing the HOA crowd. "Not even a little," Robert replied, patting his worn leather briefcase. "Just stay quiet and watch the show." Commissioner Davis called the meeting to order, moving quickly through routine business before arriving at the agenda item that had filled the room: discussion of Mercer property environmental concerns and potential eminent domain proceedings. Ellen practically strutted to the podium, adjusting the microphone with manicured fingers. "Good afternoon, commissioners. As president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association, I'm here to address an urgent environmental and public safety concern." She clicked. A remote images appeared on the projection screen. Robert's Lake, the photograph from angles that emphasized the worst of the algal bloom, making it appear far more extensive than it actually was. These disturbing images show the deteriorating condition of the private lake on Mr. Mercer's property, Ellen continued, her voice dripping with rehearsed concern. Our environmental consultant has confirmed dangerous levels of contamination that threaten to spread to surrounding groundwater. This poses an imminent risk to our community and property values. Robert felt Lily tense beside him, but he placed a calming hand on her arm. Ellen was playing directly into his hands. Furthermore, Ellen continued, Mr. Mercer has repeatedly refused reasonable offers to purchase his property, which would allow proper environmental remediation and development in keeping with our community standards. We therefore request that the county consider eminent domain proceedings to acquire this hazardous property for the public good. Murmurs rippled through the room. Commissioner Davis leaned forward. And you have documentation of this environmental hazard? We do, Ellen confirmed, gesturing to a man in an expensive suit who rose from his seat. Our environmental consultant, Mr. Reynolds, has prepared a comprehensive report. Reynolds approached the podium with the confidence of someone being paid handsomely for his opinion. Our testing indicates significant chemical contamination consistent with runoff from improperly maintained septic systems or deliberate dumping of waste products. Robert couldn't help but smile. They were actually going to try to blame him for the contamination they had caused. After Reynolds finished his presentation, Commissioner Davis looked around the room. Is Mr. Mercer present? Would you care to respond to these allegations? Robert stood nodding to Lily to stay seated. As he walked to the podium, he felt all eyes in the room follow him. Some curious, some hostile, some concerned. Good afternoon, he began, his voice steady. My name is Robert Mercer. That lake has been in my family for 3 generations, and until yesterday morning it was pristine, as it has been for decades. He connected his phone to the projector and displayed his own photos, clear documentation of the algal bloom's sudden appearance and progression over just hours. As an environmental engineer with 20 years of experience, I immediately recognized this as chemical contamination, specifically fertilizer and herbicide runoff in quantities that could only be deliberate. He pulled a small vial from his pocket. I collected water samples yesterday morning and had them independently tested. The results are conclusive. Robert displayed the lab results, highlighting the chemical compounds found. These specific chemicals are found in the perfect long formula that the Willow Creek HOA requires all homeowners to use. They've been applied in concentrations far exceeding legal limits, and they've been deliberately channeled toward my property. Ellen's face had gone from smug to alarmed. She whispered urgently to the HOA board members beside her. But that's not why I'm here today, Robert continued, his voice taking on a harder edge. I'm here because of this. He projected a new document, a map of Riverdale County's water system with a clear marker showing the source, Spring Creek Aquifer, located entirely on his property. The aftermath of the commissioners' meeting unfolded with the swift efficiency of a natural disaster. Within 24 hours, local news vans lined the pristine streets of Willow Creek Estates, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like mechanical flowers seeking signal instead of sun. The Riverdale Gazette's headline read, HOA Board faces federal charges in water contamination scandal. Robert's phone hadn't stopped ringing since he left the meeting. Calls from reporters, environmental activists, and neighbors poured in, but he declined them all, except one. Mr. Mercer, this is Mayor Wilson. I think we need to talk. Now 3 days after the meeting, Robert sat across from Mayor Wilson and the town council in the private room of Riverdale's only upscale restaurant. He brought Lily along, partly because he wanted her to learn how these negotiations worked, and partly because her presence reminded everyone what was really at stake. The future. First, Mayor Wilson began, her typically confident demeanor subdued. Let me say that the town had no knowledge of the HOA's actions. We're as horrified as you are. Robert nodded, but remained silent. 20 years in environmental engineering had taught him the power of an uncomfortable silence. The EPA has confirmed your findings, the mayor continued, glancing at the folder before her. The contamination was deliberate. Ellen Hargrove and 3 other board members have been charged. They're looking at serious fines and possible jail time. And the lake? Robert asked. The remediation team estimates 3 months for complete restoration, all at the HOA's expense, of course. The town will ensure it happens regardless of what becomes of Ms. Hargrove and her associates. Robert took a sip of water. And our agreement? The mayor exchanged glances with the town attorney beside her. This was the real reason for the meeting. The 20-year water rights lease that Robert had signed with the town was set to expire in just 3 weeks. Under normal circumstances, renewal would have been a formality. Robert had always been fair with the town, charging rates well below market value out of respect for the community his family had been part of for generations. But circumstances were far from normal now. "We'd like to propose a new 30-year agreement," the mayor said, sliding a document across the table, "with a significant increase in compensation to reflect current market rates and recent events." Robert didn't touch the folder. "And Willow Creek Estates." The mayor's smile tightened. "The development will continue to receive water as part of the town's distribution system, naturally." "Naturally," Robert echoed, his voice neutral. "And what about their ongoing campaign to acquire my property?" The town attorney cleared his throat. "The remaining HOA board members have signed legally binding assurances that they will cease all attempts to purchase or condemn your property." "Signed under duress, no doubt," Robert mused, while facing the prospect of no water access. "Mr. Mercer," the mayor leaned forward, dropping the political facade, "what exactly are you looking for here? The town can't control the HOA entirely, but we've taken every step to make this right." Robert finally opened the folder, scanning the proposed agreement. The financial terms were indeed generous, more than fair. But money had never been his primary concern. "I want three things," he said finally, looking up from the document. "First, I want environmental oversight of Willow Creek Estates written into the water agreement. Any violation of environmental regulations results in an immediate rate increase for the entire development." The mayor blinked in surprise but nodded. "That could be arranged." "Second, I want the undeveloped buffer zone between my property and Willow Creek Estates to be designated as a permanent nature preserve, with no development allowed ever." The town attorney jotted notes. "The town can acquire those parcels through eminent domain for public use as a preserve. That's doable." "And third?" the mayor asked. Robert allowed himself a small smile. "I want a seat on the town's water commission, a permanent seat tied to my property ownership." This request clearly caught the mayor off guard. Control over infrastructure was the lifeblood of local politics, and Robert was asking for a guaranteed voice in perpetuity. "That's unusual," she said carefully. "So it's private ownership of a town's water supply," Robert countered. "I'm not asking for control, just a voice to ensure that what happened to my lake never happens again to any part of our watershed." The mayor studied him for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "I believe the council would." 6 months passed with the rhythms of seasons, summer cooling into autumn, then frost touching the edges of Lake Willow as winter approached. The EPA cleanup crews had departed weeks ago, leaving behind a lake that was healing but forever changed. New vegetation grew along the shoreline, different species than before, but thriving nonetheless. Nature, Robert knew, was resilient. It adapted even when humans interfered. The same could not be said for Willow Creek Estates. The once pristine development had become a community divided with for sale signs dotting the streets, and neighbors who once gathered for HOA-sponsored barbecues now avoiding eye contact at the local grocery store. "It's weird seeing it so quiet over there," Lily remarked one Sunday morning as she and Robert walked the newly established nature preserve trail that now formally separated their property from the development. The wooden signs marking the Willow Creek Nature Preserve had been installed just last week, making official what Robert had fought for. "Change is never easy," Robert replied, pausing to watch a blue heron that had recently returned to the lake, "especially when it comes with shame attached." The criminal cases against Ellen Hargrove and the other board members had concluded with plea agreements, substantial fines, and community service rather than jail time. The civil lawsuits, however, were just beginning, with homeowners seeking damages from their former HOA leadership for the plummeting property values and the stigma now attached to their neighborhood. Robert's phone buzzed with a text from Diana Chen, the new president of the dramatically restructured Willow Creek HOA. Unlike Ellen, Diana was a retired biology professor who had opposed the aggressive tactics toward Robert from the beginning. "Reminder, Water Commission meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Still want me to present the community garden proposal?" Robert texted back a quick confirmation. Working with Diana had been one of the unexpected positive outcomes of the whole ordeal. She had approached him after the dust began to settle, not with excuses, but with ideas, ways to rebuild trust and transform the development's relationship with the environment. "You're smiling at your phone," Lily observed. "Must be Diana." Robert pocketed the device, ignoring his daughter's knowing smirk. "She's just confirming the meeting tomorrow." "Aha. The same meeting you've been preparing that presentation for all week? The one about sustainable landscaping practices that nobody but you and Diana actually care about." "The community garden proposal is important," Robert protested. "It's a first step toward you two spending more time together," Lily finished, laughing as her father's face reddened slightly. "Dad, I'm 16, not blind. You guys have been coincidentally running into each other for months." Before Robert could respond, the conversation was interrupted by the sound of an approaching vehicle. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up alongside the preserve's entrance. The driver's window lowered to reveal Jacob Miller, the CEO of Riverdale Development Corporation. the company that had built Willow Creek Estates and owned several other properties throughout the county. Mercer, Miller acknowledged with a curt nod. Got a minute? Robert turned to Lily. Head back to the cabin. I'll be here soon. After Lily reluctantly departed, Robert approached the vehicle, keeping a deliberate distance. His relationship with Miller had always been adversarial even before the HOA incident. The developer represented everything Robert opposed, prioritizing profit over environmental stewardship, viewing land as a commodity rather than a resource to be protected. What can I do for you, Jacob? Miller gestured to the passenger seat. Mind if we talk inside? It's about the Water Commission vote next week. Robert hesitated, then climbed into the SUV. The interior smelled of expensive leather and Miller's signature cologne, a scent Robert had come to associate with backroom deals and environmental corners cut. I'll get straight to the point, Miller said, turning to face Robert. The expansion proposal for the North Side development is important to me. Very important, but Water Commission seems divided on approval. 4-3 against last I checked, Robert confirmed, keeping his tone neutral. The environmental impact study wasn't favorable. Miller waved his hand dismissively. Those studies always find something to complain about. What matters is growth, jobs, tax revenue, progress. What matters is sustainability, Robert countered. The North Watershed can't support another development of that size without significant modifications to your plan. Miller studied Robert for a moment, then reached into his jacket and withdrew an envelope. 1 year to the day after Robert had discovered the poisoning of Lake Willow, he stood at its edge in the gentle light of dawn. A light mist floated above the water's surface, giving the scene an ethereal quality that reminded him of mornings spent fishing with his grandfather decades ago. The lake wasn't exactly as it had been before. Ecosystems never truly returned to their previous state after trauma, but it was alive and thriving once more, albeit differently. Penny for your thoughts, came Diana's voice as she approached along the shore path, 2 travel mugs in hand. Robert accepted one gratefully, just thinking about how much has changed in a year. For the better, she asked, standing beside him to watch a family of ducks glide across the water. Mostly, he acknowledged, though I could have done without certain parts. They sipped their coffee in comfortable silence, the kind that develops between 2 people who have weathered significant challenges together. The past 6 months had seen their relationship evolve from cautious allies to something deeper, a partnership built on shared values and mutual respect. The last of the lawsuits settled yesterday, Diana informed him. Ellen's insurance is covering most of the damages to the homeowners. She'll be paying off the rest for years, but at least it's finally over. Robert nodded. Ellen Hargrove had left Riverdale months ago, her reputation in tatters, her real estate license revoked. He took no joy in her downfall, but couldn't deny the justice in it. And Miller? Diana asked, knowing today was the day. The council votes at noon, Robert replied. It could go either way. The battle over the North Side development had consumed much of Robert's energy over recent months. True to his word, Jacob Miller had lobbied hard for his original plan, leveraging his considerable influence with certain council members. But Robert had been equally determined, building a coalition of environmental advocates, concerned citizens, and forward-thinking business owners who recognized that sustainable development would serve the community better in the long run. After their confrontation in Miller's SUV, the developer had tried every tactic in his playbook, from attempting to discredit Robert publicly to offering increasingly generous consulting contracts that thinly veiled their true purpose as bribes. When those failed, he had reluctantly submitted a modified proposal with some of the environmental protections Robert had demanded, but not all. Whatever happens today, Diana said, placing her hand over his, you've already changed the conversation in this town. That counts for something. Before Robert could respond, the sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention. 3 cars pulled up near the cabin, Mayor Wilson's sedan, Councilman Taylor's pickup truck, and most surprisingly, Jacob Miller's black SUV. What are they doing here? Diana whispered. The vote isn't for hours. Robert shook his head, equally puzzled. Let's find out. They walked up from the shore to meet the unexpected visitors. Lily emerged from the cabin as well, drawn by the commotion. Mayor Wilson stepped forward first. Robert, sorry to disturb you so early, but we have a situation that couldn't wait. Miller stood slightly apart from the others, his expression unreadable but lacking its usual arrogance. What's happened? Robert asked. Councilman Taylor, who chaired the planning commission, cleared his throat. There was a leak at Miller's current construction site last night. Chemical containment failure. Initial testing shows contamination in the groundwater moving toward the North Aquifer. Robert felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The North Aquifer was smaller than his but connected to the same watershed. Contamination there could eventually reach Lake Willow and the town's primary water supply. How bad? He asked. Bad enough, Miller admitted, speaking for the first time. But we caught it early. The containment team is already on site. Mayor Wilson stepped closer. "We need your help, Robert, as an environmental engineer and as someone who's dealt with similar contamination. Miller's team is good, but you're better." Robert looked at Miller, understanding the cost of the man's pride in coming here like this. Why not go directly to the EPA? Miller's jaw tightened, because by the time they mobilized, the contamination could spread further. And because he hesitated, clearly struggling, because you were right. About the environmental protections, about all of it. A year ago, Robert might have enjoyed this moment, the vindication, the acknowledgement from his adversary that he had been right all along. But standing beside the lake that had nearly been destroyed, he felt only the weight of responsibility.